Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the AIAA Los Angeles Las Vegas section E meeting on Saturday, January 15, 2022. So first, this is our first event of the year for the year. So happy New Year to everyone. Yeah, I wish you all have a wonderful, prosperous, and healthy New Year of 2020. Yes, Matu, we hear you. We try to invite you to the panel. You have to click enable. But anytime you can join us and say a few words if you like. So today we have a wonderful speaker on a very exciting topic. This spacesuit and moon dust is very important. So before that, we have some logistics to go through. First of all, we thank our AIAA headquarters for providing this exciting Zoom platform, very expensive. Really highly appreciate for their support. This event is being recorded and it will be posted online and on podcasts afterwards. All the attendees will receive the email for the link to the podcast. And thanks a lot to Dr. Kuznetz for the permission. Just a word, if your bandwidth, network bandwidth is an issue, you can use the internet Wi-Fi for the video, and you can use dial-in for the audio. And during the event, please type your question in the Q&A box or wait till the end of the presentation. During the Q&A session, you can raise hand. You are welcome to speak out, ask your question verbally, and interact with the speaker. Just a few words about AIAA. AIAA, as you know, is a very top aerospace professional organization, membership-based, nonprofit. Our president right now is Mr. Basil Hassan. Executive director is Mr. Daniel Dan Dumbacher. Our section chair is Dr. Jeffrey Purcell from Raytheon. Our membership were, across all the states in the country, plus 88 countries, and include 95 companies. People like a company like Boeing, SpaceX, Blue Origins, they are all our corporate members. So if you are employee in those companies, they will cover your membership dues. Our headquarters is in Reston, Virginia. I just cut short a little bit, join the professional society, you got a lot of benefits, networking, you can immediately get in touch of many aerospace experts and a lot of AIAA resources you can use. There are different level of membership, professional, students, educator, which is free, corporate, associate, retiree, and the new high school students, which is also free. Right now, we have a 50% off for the student to professional transition discount, 50% off. And if you are retiree, you also enjoy great big discount, and you can contact customer service directly. Now, once you become a member, you got a lot of benefits, like AIAA Engage, Aerospace America, great discount for attending AIAA conferences. And AIAA also also have awards, and also the student scholarship. And another important aspect for AIAA is the advancement of membership. So you join a member a few years, you become senior member, and you can be nominated, become associate fellow. For example, Mr. Elon Musk of SpaceX and Mr. George Whiteside of Virgin Galactic, they are our associate fellow. Then you can advance yourself to fellow, like our session chair, Dr. Jeff Bushell, Dr. Dan Raymer, and or Mr. Steve Izakowicz of Aerospace Corporation, and Dr. Martin Bradley, many of those. And then you can advance to another honorary fellow, like Miss Queen Shotwell, Bill Gerstenmaier, Dr. Mark Lewis. And so yeah, anyway, there's a couple of things, and the local area, Los Angeles is, as you know, is very strong in aerospace, has a long heritage of aerospace. So we are blessed to be in this area. Then we also have newsletter opportunities, so welcome to submit your articles or any recommendation. So our speaker today is Dr. Lawrence Kuznetz. He's a former NASA senior scientist and aerospace engineer. He holds advanced degree from Columbia University and University of California, Berkeley. His project at NASA was a filtration system for Apollo command module to prevent the return of hypothetical pathogens from the moon. During Project Apollo, he was on console and mission control using 41-node man, a computer model of the human body and the spacesuit. He wrote these to predict metabolic rate and the consumable usage of EVAs, which is still in use today. Following Apollo, he was assigned to the build team at the Kennedy Space Center, responsible for tile installation and the final construction of Space Shuttle Columbia prior to first flight. Following a decade of consulting and teaching, during which he earned 8 US patents in the field of extreme environment protection, did a postdoc at NASA Ames and taught at UC Berkeley, MIT International Space University. He returned to Johnson Space Center in 2001 as experiments manager for human research program on the shuttle and ISS. During this time, he wrote a notable white paper used by Congress to improve the HRP research process and created the bioadvisory algorithm Violet. This voice interrogated operator for life support and exploration tracking is a smart spacesuit. Is a smart spacesuit body system designed to augment mission control or replace it at distance beyond the reach of real-time guidance. In 2012, Dr. Kuznetz left NASA to create the HyperNet paradigm, a project-based STEAM learning tool, and use it to form the MarsSuit project, a spacesuit and life support system for the exploration of Mars, which is now under construction. Dr. Kuznetz has written a climate change novel, a spacesuit user manual for kids 9 to 90, and the Save the Shuttle, a space shuttle autobiography. He is the author of numerous peer-reviewed journal articles, including the first to show that liquid water can be stable in the Martian environment. And the Earth-based extremophile can survive in it. In the wake of COVID-19, he has come full circle, using everything he learned in his NASA career to form Planetary Protect. It's actually planetaryprotect.com, and create the Q suit for future pandemic protection by preventing forward and backward contamination. On a lighter note, he was the only non-celebrity guest to appear on the Johnny Carson Tonight show on consecutive nights, and enjoys playing keyboard at dark and the dingy piano bars in his spare time. So that's heartily welcome our distinguished speaker, Dr. Lawrence Kuznetz.
Thank you, Ken. Going through that whole list of stuff makes me realize I'm not a kid anymore. Dorothy, this isn't Kansas anymore. It's a lot's going on. It seems like a flash, but anyway, I'm pleased to talk today to AIAA. There's a lot in this presentation. Originally, it started out just a discussion of how you can use technology that we know of to help mitigate the effects of coronavirus or similar. but then it expanded to cover the world of spacesuits in general. And so I assume most people listening are interested in spacesuits, and they're somewhat familiar with what's going on today with the Artemis program, the Artemis spacesuit. So we'll get right to that. So in the first slide here, you see the topic: future spacesuits, Moon and Mars, stopping a pandemic with Mars suit technology. The image is one that I used in the Humans to Mars Summit in 2021. And it will also be given, this particular talk will be given in the Humans to Mars Summit, or the Explore Mars Summit in 2022 in May in Washington. And it's guaranteed to create quite a stir. As we proceed through the slide, you'll see why. But let's just get right into it. The first slide, let's start with the moon. So we are returning to the moon. That's the Artemis project. And we're in the process of building a spacesuit to handle that, or an EMU, as we call it. So it's got a pretty tall barrier to leap, because we had a successful suit 53 years ago that did everything that we asked it to do then. So at a minimum, a new Artemis EMU, extramolecular mobility unit, will have to do the same. So let's just take a look at what it was like to wear the spacesuit of the time, which had the designation Apollo A7LB, which is now the current gold standard. So let's just, this is about a 2 or 3 minute video.
Roger, bottom step. Alright, you do have to be rather careful to keep track of where your center of mass is. Sometimes it takes about 2 or 3 spaces to make sure that you've got your feet underneath you. And about 2 or 3 or maybe 4 easy paces can bring you to fairly smooth stop. Direction. Like a football player, you just have to put out to the side and cut a little bit.
To watch Buzz Aldrin demonstrating his Hamilton was built for this EVA. You can get quite a quality in the way Buzz is.
Work, but it seems your forward stability is not quite as good as it is in the conventional, more conventional but after.
Now you see a little bit of the downside, kind of like an overturned turtle trying to get up.
You're halfway. That's right. I'll just come and help you. Okay. Okay. Yep. Remind me to dust my camera too, will you? Don't forget to dust your camera.
We'll keep track of that for you, see.
Here I am, folks, in the middle of a boulder field. Mineral texture is appears to be subophytic to sort of like a good diabase, although a little coarser. Middle. I'm in Max Cooling, and you're flopping around like a. How you doing?
That's 120 pounds on Earth he's lifting.
Whee! Boy, when you do this, then you go down slope. That first step is a long one. This is the best way for me to travel, uphill or downhill. What's that? Like this? Two-legged hop? Or seen, yeah.
That will be probably our last documented sample that we'll have time for. We're going to ask you to move on back to your fur rake sample.
Hey, John, this is perfect with the limb and the rover and you and Stone Mountain. Come on out here and give me a salute. Big Navy salute. Okay, here we go, a big one. Off the ground, before.
Well, there you go. Sometimes we forget just how capable the Apollo EMU was. It's a high bar, as you can see. Quite a bit of diverse activities. Obviously, difficulties getting up if you fall, but not great difficulties. You're looking at 53-year-old technology, and we're having an enormous time reproducing that in today's world. So that is the challenge for the Artemis EMU. And by the way, for those who aren't versed in the language, an EMU stands for Extravehicular Mobility Unit, and it represents a spacesuit, often called the PGA or Pressure Garment Assembly, the life support system that goes with it, toolkits, cameras, and miscellaneous hardware. The entire package is called an EMU. So for Artemis, the challenge is, can you beat what we had in 1969? Can you do it faster? In the next year, that's when by 2025. Can you do it cheaper? So these are the questions that the world of spacesuit designers is facing today. So the technologies available are falls into two categories, and maybe some secret one I don't know about, but either suits are gas pressurized or mechanically pressurized with materials. So let's take a look at a little history here. Of course, NASA's been in this business since 1969, actually before then. And if you go down counterclockwise from the top left, you see the Apollo EMU, which was, by the way, the only walking suit that NASA built. Everything that followed for a shuttle and ISS is not a walking suit. It has no lower torso mobility whatsoever. It's not designed for walking. So you can see how the suits evolved into a space shuttle, an ISS suit. There was a hard suit developed at NASA Ames. And most recently, NASA got into in-house designing of their own spacesuit called the Z2 with rear entry, and eventually took on the job of designing the Artemis EMU in-house themselves. All of these suits, every one that you're looking at, has the following characteristics. They're pressurized by oxygen. They use sublimation for cooling. They have hard upper torsos. They have fans, pumps, heat exchangers. They're closed loop. They're like a thermos bottle, completely closed to the environment. Self-contained. They have liquid cooling garments. They have multi-layer installation. It's a heavy portable life support system that goes on, and basically it's a thermos bottle approach. So you have to build the suit like a thermos bottle, because the extreme of temperature, you see simultaneous hot and cold temperatures on the moon and in low Earth orbit, both for shuttle and ISS. If you go outside facing the sun, you're looking at 250 degrees above 0 Fahrenheit. And the back of you facing away from the sun is minus 250. So the only way you can handle such extremes simultaneously is to build a thermos bottle kind of approach. Back in 1967, another design came about of mechanical counterpressure, where instead of using air to pressurize the suit, Paul Webb came up with PowerNet spandex that used multiple material layers. When you breathe with multiple material layers, you have to, in order to balance the chest pressure with the helmet pressure, you have to have a breathing bladder that balances these two. It was successfully tested for 2 3/4 hours. It was tailored to the user, but it had a lot of difficulty putting it on and off, and the pressure was uneven. It caused capillary bursting, blood and fluid pooling. Later on, our old friend David Newman improved upon this rather impressively with mechanical counterpressure biosuit. You see David wearing that fashion shot perspective of it. So the MIT biosuit also uses mechanical counterpressure, but it uses, in addition to spandex, Kevlar, elastic, urethane foams. It has lines of non-extension to reduce the layers. Also has a breathing bladder. It was tested up to 3.6 PSI. It has to be custom tailored using a whole body laser scanner. Cooling takes place through the layers of evaporation in theory. Great difficulty donning and doffing this. It still had to use gas-filled and gas pressurized gloves and boots. It was improved over Webb's design, but although it was funded by NIAC, which is an advanced innovative concept, it was never baselined by NASA for missions. Multiple testings revealed a lot of issues, which remain today. All of these suits, whether they're gas pressurized, mechanical pressurized, have to deal with the holy grail of spacesuit design, which is mass, gravity, and inertia. So the way to look at that is like this. Interviews with geologists, astrogeologists, explorers, backpackers, military personnel have established that the maximum permissible mass that can be carried on one's back for 8 hours of daily blue collar work should not exceed 23 kilograms. So if you back that up in in lunar gravity, 1/6 gravity, that gives you a 300-pound limit for Earth weight, on Earth to design that spacesuit. And that's to just get 50 pounds. 300 pounds is usually the starting point for most of the suits that we've designed. Usually by the time you add everything else, you're well over that, but we'll discuss that in a moment. In designing a spacesuit, though, mass is not the only concern. And you have to establish limits. So you have to decide what the primary heat transfer mode is. Are you gonna evaporate? Are you gonna sublimate? You're gonna use radiant loss to get rid of body heat. And don't forget, you're wearing a thermos bottle. Get inside of a thermos bottle and generate heat. And you will expire by hyperthermia unless you figure out a way to get rid of that heat and dump it to the outside. So those are the ways you can do it: evaporation, sublimation, or radiant loss. You've also got radiation protection with career limits. Do not exceed career limits. You've got contamination issues. You've got glove dexterity, a big problem in all spacesuits to date, where with fingernail damage and dexterity has always been a problem, remains a problem to this day. Walking mobility in Artemis suits have to be at least as good as Apollo, better, probably. Pre-breathe requirements. You don't want to have to spend 30 to 45 minutes in your vehicle before you can step outside. Like we had to do that in Apollo because we started in a greater pressure, but the pressure in the spacecraft back in Apollo was only 5 psi. So going from 5 psi to the suit pressure, which was only 3.7 psi, you didn't have to pre-breathe very long. But that's not the case for a shuttle. It's not the case for ISS. It's not the case for any suit where you're going to take the suit pressure, the habitat pressure, greater than the suit pressure. So the habitat pressure for Artemis is going to be at least 8 psi, possibly more. And that means you're going to have to pre-breathe. So the idea is to somehow get rid of that pre-breathe requirement, get it to be low. The suit has to be able to survive a micrometeorite hit. The suit needs to have real-time help in case there's emergencies. Has to be able to work in that environment for 8 hours, a typical workday. Don't forget, we're not talking about flags and footprints, as some people call it, missions like Apollo. We're talking about working and living there daily and establishing a base. So your work day is going to probably be more like our work day. And if anything goes wrong with the primary life support system, you must have a secondary life support system that can give you a minimum of 30 minutes of greater emergency. And on top of all these things, you have to have a waste management system, ventilation, remove toxicity, body temperature regulation. You have to worry about the size and power of the battery, communication, CO2 removal, a lot of stuff has to go into designing such a suit. So no pun intended, but cramming all this technology into a 300-pound suit and doing it cheaper, faster, and better than Apollo EMU is a massive challenge. And the challenge is obvious, but you've probably seen a lot of suits out there that act like they can meet that challenge, but you should not be fooled. Never be fooled by a suit that looks pretty. That's the mantra that you should always pay attention to when it comes to spacesuits. So on the upper left, you're looking at the Boeing Starliner. If Starliner goes, this is the suit that astronauts will wear. This is not an EVA suit. This is not an EMU. This is an intravehicular suit for emergency depressurization inside the capsule. MIT's biosuit that you're looking at does not include a life support system at all. Now you look at the cool looking, right out of the 22nd century SpaceX Dragon suits that you see them wearing. Again, these are not EVA suits. These are IVA suits intended only to be worn inside the vehicle. And then you get to the other pretty one that here you see a former administrator of NASA doing a big dog and pony show with NASA representatives from the Johnson Space Center, showing off NASA's XEMU. And as many of you know, and as we'll get to shortly, this really was a $1 billion cost overrun pipe dream that's led to all kinds of issues today that we'll discuss. So don't be fooled by suits that look pretty. That's the message here. Okay, let's go on. Who are the players that are going to be trying to design this next generation Artemis spacesuit? So of course you've got NASA. You've got Collins, which was Hamilton Standard and Hamilton Sunstrad, and you got International Latex. They've been in partners for a long time. You have Boeing, SpaceX, Paragon Space Exploration Systems, which recently acquired Final Frontier, Oceaneering, David Clark, Raytheon, other people getting in the foray here. So these are the players who are going to be trying to design this optimum spacesuit. So you need to stand by because NASA has released the RFP, the request for proposals. Proposals have come in. NASA is busy deciding who they're going to select to do this. But I'm cautioning you. Those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. So now, why do I say that? Well, I've been around a while. In fact, when I got involved with NASA, the Apollo EMU contracts were undergoing a lot of concern. And the reason is because the initial RFP that came out, the respondees of the world, they did not take into account, seems so silly now, that when you inflate a rubber suit to 3.5 PSI or greater, the suit is going to make you inflate like the Michelin Man, and you're going to have tremendous problems bending your joints. There was only one company that figured that out, and they won the bid. And that company was ILC International Latex. Now, why did ILC win the bid? Because their main product was Playtex bras, and they knew about rubber convolutes, and they knew what would happen if you tried to move rubber and you didn't have it convoluted in order to expedite that. So by the way, you can learn all this. It's fascinating. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. It's called The Moon Machines. You can find it anywhere on DVD. Probably find it on streaming. It's like a 5-part series on all the different major moon machines that we use during Apollo. And one of them is a spacesuit. And if you go through this, you're gonna, if you watch it, you're gonna see the contention that developed when NASA gave International Latex the contract for the Apollo EMU. Hamilton Standard immediately protested. They protested because they said ILC doesn't know anything about life support systems. We do. And NASA said, yeah, but you don't know anything about pressure garment assemblies and mobility in a pressurized spacesuit. So what happened was forced them to join forces. It's what we call a match made in hell, or strange bedfellows, however you want to call it. This relationship has been going on for decades, and Hamilton Standard, Hamilton Sunstrand, now called Collins, together with the International Latex, have been the supplier of NASA EVA spacesuits right up to the present moment, starting from the 60s to now. That's a 50-year sole contractor that's been carrying the ball for this entire project. There's been a lot of contention, a lot of protesting, and a lot of stuff like that. So why do I say that those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it? The reason for that is we're in this position now of having to design an Artemis EMU because NASA itself took on the job of doing it in-house and could not do it. Now don't get me wrong, that very group at the Johnson Space Center, called Crew and Thermal Systems Division, was where I grew up. I started there, I worked there, I did everything, got to mission control there. Wonderful, wonderful things happened when I was there. I got to know so many of the players, so many of the wonderful people and impressive technologies that came to bear. But back in those days, we were a contract monitor. We let the contracts out and let the contract out, for better or worse, to Hamilton Standard and International Latex to build the Apollo EMU. But this time around, Crew and Thermal Systems Division thought they could do this themselves. They could make this government furnished equipment. They learned a lot in the 53 years. They could harness everything that they learned to put an Artemis EMU together without the need of a major contract. And about 2 years ago, I had a meeting in Johnson Space Center with the manager for the Hamilton Standard Collins Engineering, and I was told that they'd been asked to help in this project. And I thought that was rather odd, because how can a contractor help NASA when this is an in-house project? And where were they going to get the money to do that unless it came out of another contract? Well, in actuality, the Crew and Thermal Systems Division was asking for help because they were running into problems. And those problems, and this was 2 years ago. So those problems went on and accumulated until what many of you are probably familiar with, the Inspector General of the Government Accounting Office said, hey, wait a minute, you guys, your budget to do this in-house spacesuit is the numbers are thrown all over the place, either $500 million, up to $1 billion in cost overrun, and that suit would not work. So obviously that made a big splash. And NASA was then forced to draw in the troops and go back to the old model of letting out a contract. And so that's where we stand now. There is an RFP, and it came because this could not be done in-house. That just goes to show you the extent of the problems that remain today and how history has been repeated. And unless you watch very carefully to avoid it, these are the kinds of things that happen. It makes this very difficult. So I'm very curious where this is going to go. I don't know when the award is going to be made, but keep your eyes and ears out for it, because it's a very interesting set of affairs. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, what about Mars? After all, we talk a lot about Mars, and it's the obvious that the Artemis program's major goal is to go from the moon to Mars in an organized way. The design reference mission calls for the moon to be used as a jumping off point. Okay, so what about it? Why even think about it right now? After all, we've got a RFP to worry about. It's a long way away, right? No, it's not a long way away. We know by now, again, history, it takes a decade to create, develop, test, and space qualify an EVA suit. NASA's announced humans to Mars target is early to mid 2030s. SpaceX's announced human to Mars target is late 2020s. On top of that, international players, China, Russia, are gearing up for target date. You look at that, those dates, and the clock has already started for designing a Mars EMU. It needs to happen now. But not many people are paying much attention to that. So questions a lot of you might have is, why can't we use an Artemis spacesuit on EMU? Why don't we just use the same spacesuit on Mars? We're doing all the development work, just use it. But if you look at a comparison summary of the environments of the Moon, Mars, and low Earth orbit, you begin to get a picture. The gravity level on Mars is 38%. On Mars, it's 16%. There's an atmosphere on Mars, 10 millibars. There's no atmosphere on the Moon. The atmosphere is carbon dioxide, mostly 95%. We don't have any of that on the Moon. The temperature minus the minimum temperature at the equator on Mars is minus 73. On the Moon, it's minus 247. Maximum temperature on Mars is plus 22, almost 80 degrees Fahrenheit. On the Moon, it's 123 degrees Fahrenheit, or all the more underlining why you have to have a thermos bottle on the Moon. 44% of the sun's radiant environment reaches Mars, 100% reaches Earth. There's weather, there's radiation danger, there's a lot of things. And when you look at these things in summary, there's a lot of differences. And so the short answer is you cannot use an Artemis type spacesuit on Mars. Primarily because they're designed like a thermos bottle. They have to withstand these extreme temperature differences at the same time. Mars essentially is a cold place. It's colder away from the equator. It's cold at night. It gets up to 80 degrees on the equator, but in general, it's a cool environment. It's not a simultaneous hot and cold environment. So building a thermos bottle approach with all the mass involved is not going to work in 38% gravity. And of course, as I just mentioned, the radiation environment, the Moon is different. The G level soil is different. A lot of the hardware in the portable life support system won't work. I could go on and on and on, but here's the bottom line. A 300 plus pound Artemis EMU that we're in the process of designing will represent the apex of current technology. It would have to shrink by over half to even be considered a candidate for Mars. That's only half the problem. The other half is that planetary protection must be a key requirement in human Mars missions, and no suit to date has even given it lip service. COVID has made it obvious preventing forward and backward planetary contamination must be a priority. Just as a little photo to show you what we're dealing with, you're looking at the left, 150-pound person, and you're looking at the right, 150-pound person in a 300-pound EMU. So just imagine what it's going to take to shrink all that down to the size of a 150-pound person. You get some idea of the challenge of just taking a Artemis EMU and working on it to get it down to that size. It's worth repeating. Half the mass of an Artemis suit would have to be cut. All current designs are too complex and heavy, and evolving a Mars spacesuit from these type of suits is like putting a square peg in a round hole that will not work. And unless significant breakthroughs occur, our astronauts on Mars might look like this, or they might look like this, but they'll probably look mostly like this, where you'll be attached by an umbilical to a rover. You won't be able to work for more than a couple of hours at a time. And it underscores the fact this is not a fashion show. We have a problem, Houston, and how are we going to deal with it? The first thing to understand is just how different Mars is from the Moon. Mars is a big place. It's a planet. It's the kind of place like Earth where would you wear a ski jacket in the Caribbean? Would you wear a bikini in the Arctic. That's the kind of place you're looking at. So when it comes to comparing the moon and low Earth orbit, let's just take a look at some visuals to get an idea of how different these places are. So let me just watch this guy. I'll wait.
Bill Anders, Jim Lovell, and myself have spent the day before Christmas up here doing experiments, taking pictures, and firing our spacecraft engines to maneuver around. What we'll do now is follow the trail that we've been following all day and take you on through to a lunar sunset. The moon is a vast, lonely, forbidding type existence or expanse of nothing. It looks rather like clouds and clouds of pumice stone. And it certainly would not be a very inviting place to live or work.
In the words of Buzz Aldrin, this is a place of magnificent desolation. Why on earth we want to go back there and spend billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, or however much to get there and establish a base there, I honestly don't know. Mike Collins and Neil Armstrong and many other people chimed in that we should not be dedicating ourselves to do this. But that's the reality of today's world. It seems to change with administration. President Obama made Mars the prime target and said we should just go right there after just some very brief demonstration flights on the moon if necessary. But now we're all involved with a gateway, a base, and again, history, if history's not ignored, we will end up in a black hole of spending that will keep us on the moon for decades before we ever get out of that black hole. Just personal opinion. Many of you may have a different opinion. But let's contrast this environment to Mars. And let's look at some photos. There's widespread frost on Mars. Looks like you could get up there and make snowball, build a snowman out of it up at Utopia Planitia. Ice-filled craters more than 50 miles across. Recent running water coming down the sheer walls of some of these craters. Look at these gorgeous pictures: a water ice cap at the North Pole, limestone deposits, Gale crater, rapidly moving seasonal dunes at Nili Pratera. More limestone deposits poking through CO2 ice at the South Pole, rocky terrain, undulating plains. This is Opportunity's footprints you can see in the background. Hills and valleys, majestic craters, rock-strewn plateaus, winds and dust devils. Evidence of flowing liquid water that we've just seen that seems to come and go very quickly. So these are vastly, vastly different places. And again, when you go through and compare the environments, you see just how different they are, right down to the daily life. A day on Mars is 24 hours and 39 minutes. A day on the moon is 29 days, right? It goes on. The soil on the moon, you can grow stuff in. We know what it's composed of. I'm sorry, on Mars. The soil on the moon is much more toxic, and likely cannot grow anything in it. You have seasons on the moon. We have weather on Mars, rather. You have weather on Mars. All these kind of things. So with all this in mind, rather than try to shoehorn an Artemis EMU into a Mars type spacesuit, doesn't it make sense to start off with a fresh sheet of paper? And this is what confronted me back in 1991 when I decided to do the first postdoc at NASA Ames on spacesuits and life support systems for the exploration of Mars. And deciding early on that the right way to go was to let science and the environment drive the design, not engineering. So in the past, for Apollo, the shuttle program, ISS, hopefully not Artemis, but I fear the same thing is going to happen with Artemis. Engineering drives the EMU, and science is the slave. But the way this really should work, especially on Mars, is science, and the environment should drive engineering, and the EMU should be the slave. Well, that's fancy talk. So how do you implement that? Well, about a decade ago, while I was teaching at Berkeley, we came up with the idea of how to do that. And it was something called the Mars Suit Project. Now, the idea of the Mars Suit Project was to use university, government, and industry resources in a synergy to develop and build a spacesuit for Mars using the Martian environment. And the notion was to leverage STEAM resources with something called the HyperNet paradigm. So let me tell you what the HyperNet paradigm is. The easiest way to look at it is that let's take a spacesuit. Let's call it a Mars suit. But this actually goes for any project you can think of. If you want to work on cancer, if you want to work on undersea technology, if you want to work on whatever project you can think of, you break it up into its parts, its elements. So in the case of a Mars suit, you see these 12 elements here that we broke it up into: pressurization subsystem, thermal environmental control and life support, materials, in situ resources, science, life sciences, trade studies, cost, systems integration, sensors and displays, power, robotics, helmet, torso, and portable life support system design, mission planning. These are the main elements. So the way the HyperNet paradigm works is you then combine these elements into what we call, an old term, work packages. And you see in this particular case, there are 6 work packages where they're bunched together. Now keep in mind, work packages 1 through 6, because this is what happens next, is how the whole paradigm works. The darker red that you see are the 6 work packages. So what happens is you assign each work package to a talent pool. Now the talent pool is, it consists of universities, industries, NASA representation, the public, anybody that wants to get into that talent pool. They look at these work packages and they say, yeah, I'd like to work on that. And so you then establish these talent teams, each one working on a particular work package. And you give them each, and you see some hypothetical, some examples of what we did. We had minority partner universities, HBCUs, with UC Berkeley, MIT, with Naval Academy, University of Maryland, University of Texas. So we assign each one of these work packages to these talent pools, and we give each one of them, or we give everybody, a baseline. This is the starting point. This is what our requirements are. This is what we are trying to do. And we let them run over the course of a time period, usually a semester. It can be whatever arbitrary time period you want it to be. And at the end of that time period, each one of these groups comes up with a report or a trade study, or whatever they do. Now, keep in mind, after the very first time period, they're going to have something that's really an improvement over the baseline, but how much can they really do in a short period of time? So you see the red line that's coming from trade studies. It goes up in another line, it goes to feedback. And in this particular case, it goes into the leader of the pack, which over here was a NASA organization, Exploration Systems, Mission Directorate. They looked at this and they fed it back to technical leads. In other words, this whole upper part of this diagram is peer review. So designated experts would take a look at what was done and give it a reality check. And then in the second semester or second time period, this improved version would come back through the system and it would get another improvement. So when you look upon this, if you look upon this as a machine where each period of time, the group is being given an improved version from the prior period, you can see iterative evolving approach, and products evolve and they get mature. So the way this was done, just to give you an idea, each at the university level, you would have teams of maybe 10 to 15, and each team would be given a different lead, like life support, pressurization, thermal control. There would be faculty leads, there would be mentors, and teams would work on this. So you basically give this you give this a group that is taking this, analyzing it, and improving it, and then feeding it back into the hopper. So I have to go through that because I want you to understand that you can apply this, and this has been going on 10, 12 years now. You can apply this to almost anything you think of. The same idea, breaking things up, giving them to teams, evolving the teams over time, giving them peer review. And people can take this course more than once. You can start out with as a bachelor's, a freshman. You can go all the way to a graduate student. You can do a PhD in some of these areas. Some of the students that were in this did. And on top of that, you get exposed to the entire world of, in this particular case, spacesuit design, and there are jobs. So there's a very positive element in doing this methodology that works directly with STEM, or now called STEAM, advancements in education. So just to show you some of the advancements that took place, you see how this concept evolved, and you're looking at not a working prototype, but just a conceptual prototype. And you see somebody over at one of the museums, Space Science Museum, walking out and demonstrating what the thing might look like visually, right? Okay. So after doing this for this many years, we've come to certain conclusions, and the distinguishing feature of the Mars suit that's been designed this way is a separate system for the helmet and torso. Sounds unusual, but if you can create an open loop system instead of a closed loop system, you can get rid of pumps, heat exchangers, fans, all kinds of mass that is making an Artemis EMU and Apollo EMU as heavy as it is, because they're thermospaddle, they're closed loop. So can you make an open loop system? And the answer is yes. If you separate the helmet from the torso, you can use the Mars environment to pressurize the torso. And you can use a separate oxygen system for breathing. So you have two separate breathing gases. One has an infinite source because the Mars atmosphere is infinite, and it's CO2 and it's got pressure in it. You can blow it in, pressurize the suit. It can bust out through a relief valve to maintain the pressure. And lo and behold, in one fell swoop, using that environment enables you to cut that mass nearly in half. And that's the beauty of doing it, but it has other benefits as well. If you get a puncture in a suit that's completely pressurized by oxygen, you're going to lose all that oxygen, and you're going to end up with 10 seconds of useful consciousness before you pass out. If you pressurize the torso with a Mars atmosphere that's separated from the helmet, and you get a puncture, you can repair that puncture. You don't have 10 seconds of useful consciousness. You have much more. So in terms of emergencies, this is a much better way to go. So you've got, you lose less oxygen because the oxygen is restricted to the helmet. It doesn't leak. There are many different reasons why this distinguishing feature made itself known when you start analyzing how to design a spacesuit in an environment like Mars. The main one is mass reduction. So I got into that already. Instead of having a closed environmental control system, you blow in through this in-suit compressor, filtered dry air. It removes all of the heat, toxins, and contaminants, and then it goes out. And it's simple. There's another benefit, and this is one of the top requirements of future suits, and that's planetary protection. Now, if you look at this image on the upper left, you're going to see we'll see this a little better. You're going to see an envelope of gas that's being emitted from the backpack on Apollo 12. That's all kinds of stuff that's coming off that Earth suit, contaminating Mars. A solution to that in an open loop system is you use viral filters at a compressor inlet, and you use more viral filters at a compressor at the relief valve outlet. So anything that comes in is filtered, anything that goes out is filtered. This particular design is very compatible with this kind of planetary protection. So there's a lot more to the design. I can't spend all day telling you all of them, but over the years, many features have been built into the concept of the Mars spacesuit. Here you see toxicity protection. using dense monolithic membranes that would go against the skin to make sure there's no toxic materials in the atmosphere that's interacting with the skin. Mobility, I'll play this for just a brief second. You can see how moving the center of gravity down and making it lighter makes all the difference in the world. Here you see what happens if you fall with a high center of gravity. Conrad in Apollo 12, and you're going to look at Gene Cernan, Apollo 17.
Hey, Don, and where we
Center of
walk,
gravity is much lower.
we stir up darker material.
Pounds of mass, and
Just
look how he's
slightly,
walking,
but it's darker.
walking like you and I. Right?
The same.
Other things that we've embodied in the conceptual design is variable pressure torso and gloves. If you have a high pressure glove, hard to work against it. At least a fingernail and other damage. So you can temporarily reduce the pressure in the glove, enabling you to do better work, dexterity. Advanced thermal control. Again, if you're in a cold place, you wear an overlayer on a Mars suit. If you're in a warm place, you peel the overlayer, kind of like ski jackets and going downhill skiing. So lots of ways to take those into account. Other ways, direct blood cooling into a glove or a boot can improve heat transfer. Ceramic textiles that efficiently re-emit infrared X-rays to keep you warmer. So using nanoceramic fabrics convert multi-frequency emitted body heat to enable warmth in colder environments. Lots of advanced materials. One other element that's being added to this on Mars, there will be up to a 40-minute lag time between the time you ask for help and the time you get it back. That's how far away we are. 135 million miles. It's going to require 20 miles each way, and you might have an emergency that requires something faster than that. So the way to handle that is you make the suit smart. You build the kind of technology in that it can substitute for mission control in these emergencies. And we did that in 2009 back at the Johnson Space Center with the creation of Violet and Legacy. Violet's a voice-initiated operator for Lunar Mars exploration tracking. And here you're going to see in the next video, you're going to see Chris Cassidy. Been to ISS quite a few times, commander. Just spoke to Chris the other day. Here you see him testing out Violet.
Inlet temperature check.
Your LCBG inlet temp is 37 degrees Fahrenheit and the optimum is 56. You might consider adjusting your coolant to match. Your metabolic rate is 1021 BTUs per hour. Your body heat storage is 229 BTUs.
Sweat loss check.
First you can tell it to say, tell me a joke. I'll tell you a joke.
Tell me a joke.
Why did the man at the orange juice factory lose his job? He couldn't concentrate.
So these are all the different kinds of things you have to take into account when you're 135 million miles away at points and you don't have anybody in your backyard to help you. Okay, good stuff, right? But so far, this is just a PowerPoint pitch. How do you make this a reality? And the answer to that is it already is a reality. I want to show you the first prototype of a Mars suit that we have been building now for the last several months. Again, this is an initial prototype. It's coming along faster than we could possibly imagined, but here you're going to see a display of it.
Today's method. Yeah, let's see where my index marker is through.
Cameron Smith, who's built jumps on balloons. He's got a worked at Portland State University, and extremely competent of garments like. So right now he's pressurizing the helmet. There's a neck dam which enables you watch the torso is being pressurized. Now you can see it in place. The suit has the capability of separate gas ports, both the helmet and the suit. You see certain marks on legs. Those are designated where the viral filters will be placed to contaminate planetary forward and back. But he's got his dexterity. The suit has been inflated to 2 psi. We will be stepping that up to 3 and 4 psi. Along quite nicely. He's looking at Okay, so I just wanted to give you a snapshot of that. It's extremely exciting. It's happening very fast after spending so long on PowerPoint and papers and classes. To watch this suit actually be built, have the materials come together, and the next step of installing the filtration system is gratifying and wonderful to be a part of. And I'll get into that a little more later. But this is all building into something that's far more important that I wanted to finish up with, which is stopping a pandemic with spacesuit technology. And that's why we formed Planetary Protech, which is a company dedicated to this goal. So it helps to look at what is a pandemic, because COVID is only one of, hopefully the last, but fearfully there'll be other pandemics. A pandemic is a rapidly spreading pathogen, initially of unknown origin, potentially fatal, crosses domestic and international boundaries. Its entry and exit mode is poorly understood. Its mitigation strategies are slow to develop. Don't we know that? It can cross, theoretically, planetary and galactic boundaries. So does NASA have any exposure to this? And the answer is yes. The space community has been involved in concerns like this since 1958 with COSPAR, the International Committee for Space Research. COSPAR recognized the potential for alien pathogens of unknown origin to cross planetary and galactic boundaries, and thereby passed Article 11 of the 1967 Outer Space Treaty that all spacefaring nations must avoid harmful contamination resulting from the introduction of extraterrestrial matter, unquote. Forward contamination control was mandated for all outbound planetary missions that entailed clean room sterilization, and backward contamination control was mandated for all planetary missions returning to Earth, obviously from the Moon and Mars. So forward contamination control has been implemented. Here you see Perseverance undergoing sterilization in clean room prior to launch, and you see all of the workers are in clean room suits. We're all familiar with this type of environment when we send something out to Mars or into deep space, wherever we send it, including the JWST. These kind of precautions for sterilization and preventing forward contamination are taken to the best of our ability. Backward contamination started with Apollo. We haven't had to use it since Apollo, because we haven't had any people coming back. We have had samples coming back, and I'm not sure how protected they were. A lot of control was done to keep these samples locked in and Mars sample returns have to take that into account. But in Apollo, the thinking was, if hypothetical moon bugs exist, prevent their release on Earth. When? The decision was made to make that happen at post-landing at sea following splashdown. And where was the point of preventing it? And it was at the command module, not at the moon. And how? It was done by controlling the chain of exposure through quarantine. So let me show you what that looked like. the chain of protection carried through 5 steps. And here you look at, well, the chain of protection from the time the command module was landed and picked up an aircraft carrier, and then made its way both by land and sea to the lunar receiving laboratory in Houston, where the astronauts were quarantined. And many of you, well, let me show you some photos of this. There were filters in the command module's post-landing ventilation system that prevented 1/10 of a micron particles from exiting the command module after landing. Now, there was a problem with that because you put a filter on the post-landing ventilation system that stringent, it's going to cut down the airflow. It's kind of like a ceiling fan that blows the air out. That's going to make it hotter in there, and it wasn't hot. But aside from that, the decision was made to just open the hatch anyway. So anything that was in there is going to get out as soon as you open up the hatch. And the mitigation procedure for that, as it were, was a biological isolation garment. This stopped, theoretically, these pathogens from getting into the suit, in with the astronauts, but it didn't do anything for pathogens escaping into the atmosphere. And here you see, once the astronauts were picked up in their quarantine suits, they were placed into a specially prepared Airstream trailer called the MQF, Mobile Quarantine Vehicle. And here you see President Nixon greeting Apollo 11, Buzz, Mike, and Neil. By the way, my roommate at the time, John Hirasaki's in the background, also quarantined. His job was to be the chief cook and bottle washer, preparing meals during that quarantine period and attending to their needs. So he had quite a job. The lunar receiving lab at the Johnson Space Center maintained quarantine in Apollos 11 through 14 for up to 2 weeks. And here you see some photos of the quarantine. The entire crew had to be quarantined. The building was kept at a lower pressure than the rest of the environment of the Johnson Space Center or the Earth atmosphere. So in case anything leaked, it would leak in, it wouldn't leak out. They were fully prepared to get colds and whatever was outside of normal, as long as it didn't go in the other direction. And in the center and bottom pictures, you see a dedication ceremony that was held at the Johnson Space Center, again with Neil and Buzz in the lower right, commemorating the quarantine efforts in the building. So all that aside, would it be possible to stop hypothetical pathogens from entering through a spacesuit? And now if you take a look at this image on the left-hand side, you can see just what an envelope of effluent surrounds a Apollo-type EMU that is sublimating and getting rid of waste into the lunar atmosphere. And you see all that stuff is being dumped right onto the ground with no care or forethought. So there is back contamination, there's forward contamination. All this is going on. As near as I know, I could be wrong. I haven't seen the response to the RFP. As far as I know, this is not being considered for Artemis, because we don't think there's any moon bugs to worry about on the moon. What about Mars? The Mars suit that you just looked at is being designed to limit both forward and back contamination. I've already explained how we intend to do that with viral filters at the inlet and outlet. And we can design that kind of technology in to the suit to stop, to the best of our ability, anything getting into that suit and anything getting out. So knowing all of this, the question is, can this type of technology not be migrated to stop a pandemic on Earth? And that's why we formed a Planetary Protect with the goal of building the Q suit, Q for quarantine, pathogen protective suit, unparalleled defense against COVID-19 and future pandemics. So here you see how this process works. It goes from one step to the next step to a initial version of a quarantine suit to evolutionary designs. And if you look at the requirements to build a Mars suit, we basically duplicated those for a Q suit. That is, save mass, conserve power, save oxygen, extend survival time, mitigate contamination, reduce contaminants, simplify components, extend operation time, and reduce costs. So what are some of the features? I'll just give you there's a lot here, obviously, to talk about, but the two main upfront features are NASA type acronyms that we've called BB and FE. BB stands for barrier to entry and barrier to exit. Nothing gets in and nothing gets out. That's the purpose of the filters. FE stands for face-to-face exposure elimination. There are no openings in the suit, in the front of this suit whatsoever. And when you deal in a COVID environment, a hospital environment, a contagious environment, one that let's hope never happens, is far more lethal and far more contagious than COVID. You deal with it usually face to face. You have people talking to people face to face, treating people face to face. You're in a crowd face to face. This is how these kinds of pathogens are spread. So the goal here was to eliminate any openings in the face-to-face environment, and that's what's done. Other things that needed to be considered is ease of donning and doffing. A suit like this, you have to be able to get into it within 60 seconds. If you take a look at all the personal protective equipment in hospitals that people wear to protect themselves, it takes 15, 20, 30 minutes to get all the pieces together with masks and gowns and gloves and all that stuff. It needs to be very lightweight, full range of motion and dexterity, has to have 210 fog-free vision. It has to have a positive pressure in the suit that repels viruses or anything from getting into the suit through small tears. So the pressure is pushing out, not getting in, not allowing anything in. It needs to eliminate components like masks and visors and constricting shields. It needs to be low cost, sterilizable, reusable. It has to have a redundancy for temperature control, comfort, and filtration. In this particular case, super HEPA filters, which are 1/10 of a micron, have been selected to remove pathogens. By the way, COVID is 0.125, 0.13. So the individual pathogen is larger in size than the filters that are used. You have to have rechargeable batteries, ease of changing from shift for continuity, Bluetooth plugins for audio, stethoscopes, communication, optional wastewater food management. And then the last one is suit has to be able to isolate anyone wearing it from the outside world, effectively quarantining and controlling early outbreaks. So this is called rapid outbreak response. So ROR. Let me tell you how that manifests. In a future pandemic, or even with this one, as soon as an outbreak is identified, that area will have access either by warehousing or by rapid shifting to 500 or more of these quarantine suits. Everybody within a radius of TBD would be asked to put these suits on. Once you're in these suits, they can be worn continuously. There are feeding ports that you can get in and drink and eat, or you can go to a sterilizable room to do that. But essentially, you can wear these suits for the period of time it takes for symptoms to manifest. So if you get enough of these suits to where the outbreak is first identified, within 14 days, those who've come down with the outbreak can be separated from those who have not. And therefore, you can stop the outbreak rapidly. That's why it's in for rapid outbreak response. So that's the keystone of this particular design. I should also add that these suits are designed to be cost effective and lightweight and reusable and sterilizable, and within the price range of anybody, not just medical facilities, but targeting the price of this is price point is less than $200, which means you can hang it in your closet. And it would be available in hotels, cruise ships, educational institutions, besides medical facilities. So it might look like it's very targeted to medical facilities, but that's not the target audience. So with that, let me give you a little demonstration of where this stands. Back here a second, hold on. And again, Cameron Smith, let me take this forward a little bit. Cameron Smith, our resident spacesuit assembler, is gonna show you this. Out of there in a hurry. One of the things is redundancy. Every component has a backup. And finally, there's Cameron. And Cameron is indispensable because he's put all this together with the ideas that we've come up with. So I'm going to now turn it over to Cameron, who's going to take you through as he gets in.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Kuznetz, for introducing me to this project of applying systems engineering and NASA spacesuit technology to a very modern problem right here on the surface of the Earth. We've seen the sort of schematic representation of the suit. Now I'm going to show you how easy it is to put on, run the ventilators a little while, and then walk through some more of the design features. The first design feature really to see is that it's easy to put on and you can do it by yourself. This is awfully important. With a lot of personal protective equipment, you need somebody to adjust straps or to zip a zipper, that sort of thing. You don't need that with this suit. You just pull it on like an old pair of coveralls. It goes on quite easily. And you see now I've pulled it up and I've entered through a zipper that goes across the back. Now that zipper seals up tightly so that no air goes out of it. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. Now you simply slide your arms in. And you see they go directly through a cuff ring into your surgical gloves. That cuff ring is very important. It allows air that's circulating in the suit to reach your hands and lets them breathe much more easily through an entire shift, let's say. Now I'm going to put the hood on. And now I'll zip it. And now I turn on the ventilators. So the first point of the suit is that it is easy to put on. It's very flexible. I can move, I can do anything I want. My air is being brought in through these vents, these fans, and it is directed by hoses up into the helmet area. You'll notice that the helmet does not get fogged. Normally, this helmet might fog up and you wouldn't be able to see. Now there's plenty of air though flowing across the face area, the visor, and that prevents fogging. You'll also note that the visor is large and roomy. That's very important over using the suit for many hours. So now you can see, right now, the BB system, barrier to entry and barrier to exit functioning. Barrier to entry is our filters, and then barrier to exit is the vent filter. No virus can come in through the filters. Anything that does get through gets quickly washed away from your face, and then everything that goes out of the suit goes out through a filter. We also have the facial and frontal exposure elimination. There's no way for any virus particles to be contacted from the front of the face. There are no suit penetrations, there are no suit holes in the front. That's all in the back. So we're eliminating the face-to-face contact potential of virus, in particular with COVID. As I mentioned, it's very comfortable. You can see I can use my hands, I could write, I could use a phone, I could use a pen. And I'll also show you that we can sit down nice and easily. And very importantly, I can sit down and the fans will not be blocked. They do not dig into my suit or my body. I'm seated, and yet the fans continue to run just fine without being blocked. And exiting here. I have a very good rate of flow inside the suit, and so there's no CO2 building up inside. I feel perfectly normal, and we're going to quantify the CO2 numbers in a later test. Right now the batteries run for a 4-hour period, and we can raise that to a 7-hour shift if we like. The battery switch is simply right here in the middle of the chest. We can move that anywhere we like. It could be put on the cuff, it could be on the waist. Those are finer decisions that can be made later. Now I'm going to demonstrate removal of the suit, that is unzipping it. But first I'm just going to stand under the light and give you a spin all the way around so you can see all of the features that we've just described.
Okay, so there's a lot there, obviously. Just to give you a status of where things are with both the Mars suit and the Q suit. We have startup funding in place for both of these projects. Preliminary design reviews have been completed. CAD design is in work on the Mars suit. CAD design is complete with the Q suit. Let me comment on that. What you just saw was an early prototype. There's a big difference between a prototype that Cam was showing and a production version where you push a button and you can crank out tens of thousands of these for distribution worldwide. That entails taking every little piece and putting it into computer-assisted design. And that's very challenging. In fact, that's a more challenging, just overwhelming job from my perspective. But fortunately, we have some groups, a group in the UK that's just about ready to get complete with that job. And you cannot certify this through the FDA for distribution unless you do certification testing of a production version. So having a version like Cam was just showing wouldn't work for certification. It has to be a production version, which will look a lot, quite a bit different than what you saw. So we've done 5 prototypes before that. You see preliminary testing won't take place before 2023 with the Mars suit. That's already taken place. Critical design review probably 2024, 2025 on Mars suit. Yeah, that's already been done on the Q suit. And you see certification, see the timelines of production, all that kind of thing. So we formed Planetary Protect, Preparation, Protection, Prevention to just for these to meet these goals. And you see who are the folks that the founders of the company. And I don't want you to think that we're some Hamilton Standard type of organization. I also don't want you to think that we're just a bunch of guys in a garage, but we're not we're not far from a bunch of guys in the garage, but that's how Steve Jobs and a lot of other people started. So nothing to be ashamed of. Anyway, a lot of stuff, obviously, a lot of topics, and I'm happy to answer any questions if they're out there, folks.
Hello, Larry. This is
Hello.
Madhu.
Hello, Madhu. Hi.
What a nice way to start the 2022 series of talks for AIAA. Thank you so much, Larry. I've known you a long time, and it's amazing what needs to be done to make a spacesuit work in this 21st century. And my question is, Mars is going to take a while. Every single seasoned engineer we sat and talked to in a closed room tells me there are just too many hurdles to get to Mars. Thinking about Artemis, can you tell us anything at all about how we can get there and get down there on the lunar surface and step outside a vehicle by 2025? From what I hear, the suits don't work. And any thoughts?
They'll figure out some way to get on the surface. I don't want to, I don't want to insult anybody by saying that they can't come up. Very brilliant people can't come up with a solution by 2025. I don't think it'll happen by 2025. Yeah. I think it might happen by, 2026. But I don't know who you've talked to about why it's so difficult to get to Mars, but I couldn't disagree more, Madhu. I just couldn't disagree more. I'm just looking for some slides here that can kind of underline the point. Most of the major barriers we've already addressed. Let me see if I can find some of them here. I'd have to look around, but oh, wait a second. I think I found one here. Wait 1 minute. Oh yeah. First of all, a lot of people say the moon is a good place to rehearse for Mars, and that's utterly nonsense. It's nonsense. No atmosphere, terrible weather, unchecked radiation, G levels, crops won't grow, spacesuits won't work there on the moon. In situ resources are different. The moon doesn't have any clays, organics, or methane. Antarctica is a better place to rehearse for Mars. The Gateway doesn't provide good access. I could just go on forever, but here are the major technical barriers that are often stated in terms of human missions to Mars. So anybody that says that this is just, you think Elon Musk is planning on getting there within a decade if these barriers are as bad as people suggest? First is entry, descent, landing. You've all heard about the 7 minutes of terror, but there's several solutions that have been proposed, including the hypercone, supersonic retropropulsion. These are well in mature technologies. Can an astronaut land a descent craft after 6 months in 0G? See Scott Kelly's twin study if you want to know about that. Radiation protection. Yes, cancer risk can go up as high as 10%. It can be partially mitigated, but it's a single mission for those proposed solution. Career limits, and that's it. Immunology, proposed solution using the ISS Human Research Program. Bone loss, up to 15% loss and fracture risk, proposed solution. Exercise countermeasures, spacesuits and life support systems. You already see that. All these barriers are being addressed, tumbling down, and no one less knowledgeable than Neil Armstrong underscored the point. The moon in 1969 versus Mars today, the challenge then, this is his own words, was greater than it is now. And it was accomplished in less than a decade. So I honestly have no sympathy with people who think that we really can't do this in short order, and we're not ready to do this. And as far as why should we do it, that's different. Public interest, over 16 billion hits, 2 for every human being on Earth, on Mars, not the moon. Next giant leap, livable, sustainable, settlable, familiar. It cuts its education. It just hot button for students. Economics, it can be a cost-effective way with quantifiable benefits. Rocket fuel can be made there for the trip back with Bob Zubrin's Mars Direct, 19th century technology. It just is not, it's not worth really getting into all that, but I really have no clue how to answer your, going back to your initial question, Madhu. How,
yeah, I appreciate that all of us, every single one of us wants to go to Mars. But as you mentioned, when you showed that list of the numbers of things we need to do and the things that can be accomplished, there is a number 0 up front, Larry, and that is we don't even know how to stack a Mars orbital vehicle in low Earth orbit up to 600 to 800 metric tons to go into trans-Mars injection right now. But to the moon, we can go now. We don't even need a Starship. We can
you must be kidding. I don't want to get in an argument with you like from years ago, Madhu, but you must be kidding. You honestly, you're going to believe in the SLS, which is 12 years behind schedule, billions of dollars over cost, and dumps everything into the ocean at staggering cost. You actually think that that's what we're going to use? Let me tell you something. Yeah, let me tell you something. Elon Musk is going to have, hopefully, is going to have Starship able to do this. And you see, if you haven't seen them, you need to see how he's going to do it, because it's well established. We're not talking about something that's coming out of nowhere. So we can talk about that. Anyway, look, I assume we've got plenty of people with maybe more specific questions.
Oh, I'm sure there are. Oh. You know, Larry, I thoroughly enjoy the discussion and your slides. And I think everybody should know Larry was my teacher at the International Space University way back, I don't know when. And
yeah, he argued with me back then as a student. He argued with me. He hasn't stopped.
and you know, regarding SpaceX, I think they don't even need the Starship to take us to the moon, Larry. Between F9 and Falcon Heavy, we can do this using MALEO, you know, in low Earth orbit assembly and modular cluster.
I think there's a lot of people who want to ask questions, so we can get into the philosophy doing the face. So yeah,
go for it. Thank you so much. Wonderful talk.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Madhu. Madhu is a professor in USC, and he's actually very vital for this type of study. So you know, thank you, Madhu. It's great. Happy New Year talk. So Luis, go ahead.
Waiting to hear the other questions, Ken.
Oh yeah. No, I have a quick question. It was about the motive for going to the moon. You know, I've been reading all these things since I was like a kid. I read this book. I mean, it was back, granted, it was in the 70s, you know, the third industrial revolution. And I always think that big business is always behind, you know, or finance stuff. And what I was going to ask you, well, I guess your opinion about, do you think that part of the motivation is, I don't know, to utilize the moon, to mine the moon? I don't know how practical that sounds, but like you were alluding to just now, or what you were talking about, saying that it may not seem possible at all to go to Mars. You know, I mean, that technology doesn't exist to mine the moon, but I would imagine it's got to be more than just scientific, because then I agree with you. What's the point of going to the moon? You know, spending all this money.
Yeah. Oh, what's her name?
Oh, Lewis.
Yeah. Look, you couldn't be you couldn't be a writer. all of these projects, and again, I always go back to those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. If you don't think there's a military motivation in doing this, or we've been talking about helium-3 for 3 decades. What's the mind helium-3 on the moon? We use the powered nuclear fusion reactors. Give me a break. Where's your fusion reaction? Really, the reason we're probably gonna go to the moon is because the Chinese are gonna do it if we don't. There's gonna be another space race on the moon. This is insanity. This is human insanity. That's what it is. You can't live, survive. Take a look at that environment. What the astronauts themselves, the first time they saw it, what did they say? I mean, they're there. None of us have been there. This is all nonsense. We're all talking. Take the word of the people of when they were Apollo 8 actually laid eyes on that environment and what Buzz Aldrin said. This is where we're going and spending billions to get there. I can't get it. Maybe there'll be another election and another administrator, but fortunately for most of us, we live in a time where Elon Musk wants to die on the moon. He believes all of these things. He's willing to bankrupt himself to get us there. And that's great. I think that's fabulous. And people like that come along once in a lifetime, like Thomas Edison. I don't like to just gush over Elon. He's got his faults like every one of us, right? But let me tell you, if it was up to NASA, it'd never happen. We'd be in another black hole. And this space launch system, oh my God. Oh my God. I mean, all you have to know about the space launch system is that the main engines on it were shuttle derived. They're incredible technology. It took so much to evolve those to this point. And the whole message of the space shuttle was reusability. And the space launch system is going to drop those engines right in the Atlantic, plunge, the end of them. Not even think twice about it. I mean, how does NASA justify that? I don't understand. But anyway.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Industry.
So yeah, there's military, there's commercial, there's competition, all the wrong reasons. All the wrong reasons.
It's the history, right? That's it. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And thank you for the lecture. It was wonderful.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Tasha, you are next. Tasha, go ahead.
Hi, I wanted to know if it was feasible for spacesuits to be built in a way where most of the components are interchangeable. And also, what will we equip the Mars and lunar astronauts with such that they will be able to repair broken spacesuits? Because the repair system will probably be more complex than just having them 3D print some stuff, I imagine.
Well, I suspect the Artemis EMU is going to be. We've had suits that are developed for where you can replace the components. You have a hard upper torso, but then the shoulders fit. Different size shoulders, different size, leg fittings, all that stuff. So you can make them, but otherwise you'd have to make these individually fit, and they're not individually fit. There's the small, medium, large, extra large. There was an issue, and still may be with the shuttle and ISS being too small. Bonnie Dunbar, a 5-time shuttle astronaut, complained vehemently that she could no longer perform in the smaller size spacesuits well enough to qualify for another flight, because in order to fly, you've got to do some performance tests in a neutral buoyancy lab. And your score is rated against other people. And because she didn't have a small size suit that fit properly, she actually made quite a bit of protest to try to get that implemented. It never was, to my knowledge. But I feel certain, especially with the push for equal gender on Artemis, that the sizing issue for females is not going to be an issue. I have to give kudos to NASA for pushing hard for a multi-gender, multi-size design. So I do not think that's going to be a problem. It's going to be far less of a problem on Mars, because you're going to have a suit that's 150 pounds lighter. So there you go. In so many ways, it's going to be so much simpler and easier to use. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess also, what would be stuff that we would equip the astronauts with just that they could repair it on their own?
Good question. Repair the suit? Well, yeah, you would hope we would learn something from what happened with Columbia, with a tile repair. A tile repair kit was put together in the garage in Houston by my buddy Charlie Marta and I forget, God, what's his name? Really well-known astronaut, no longer with. But they figured out a tile repair kit that could plug a hole, and that people are aware of that. So you would hope that that is one of the requirements of the RFP, and I don't know if it is, because we're not going to know again until this contract is awarded. This what they have right now is NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and so people can't tell you what they're doing. You can look at the RFP, and the RFP, I didn't look that hard, but I couldn't find any part of it that said a requirement for in-suit repair. But somebody's thinking about it. Thanks for mentioning it. It hadn't occurred to me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tasha. So next, Colonel Schultes, go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Kuznetz, thanks very much for your presentation. I'm certainly not an expert in your field, but I did enjoy the particular issues that you raised that have to be overcome. You did mention during the course of your talk the importance and the impact of the time delay between Earth and Mars. What are your thoughts about, instead of having centralized mission control at Earth, the routine activities on Mars, that mission control for routine operations on Mars occur at Mars?
It's a great idea. It requires infrastructure, cost, people. And so the intermediate step was the one I showed you, Violet, voice-initiated operations for lunar Mars communications. So, and you saw it being demonstrated by Chris Cassidy. So that will be an AI bioadvisory algorithm. It's already been written. The first steps, as you saw demonstrated, has already been written. But really, it takes people doing simulations and figuring out all the things that could go wrong and building it into the suit. So the suit basically knows when you have an emergency and also has diagnostics to tell you how to fix it. That's the intermediate step, but in the long run, sure. But if you're taught, you know, that's about the best I could offer on that one. Yeah, it's a great project, by the way, an AI effort to figure all that out and build it into the suit. There's like, for instance, even the communication that you saw that Chris was talking to the suit and asking what my metabolic rate is and tell me a joke. That requires a lot of intelligent gathering about communication between astronauts and LEO on ISS and the shuttle with mission control. All that can be harvested and put into AI and then programmed into a thanks for the question.
Yeah, AI will obviously be utilized. However, oftentimes things that are not or thought about before the fact are the ones that come out to bite you first, oftentimes. And having a person in the loop is certainly an advantage. Now, for an early mission to Mars, having an individual who is in orbit about Mars could be the expert and the individual who is effectively doing mission control for routine operations. Do you see any issues associated with that between what NASA would like to see versus what the needs of a mission might actually involve? And I'll mute myself and listen.
And actually, I don't see any issues. I've given it some thought. I've written a novel, Madhu has read it, called Cassie's Guess. It's about the first human mission to Mars. It's basically it's an environmental climate novel. It looks at what's happened on Mars in terms of losing its atmosphere and its water and potentially life in a geologic heartbeat, and how we might learn from that as to what's happening now on Earth, and how this first mission, their objective is to go find out what happened there. And I use a crew of 6. They're all cross-trained. So everybody, best way to handle this is you have to have a cross-trained crew. And some of those crew would have to be versed in exactly what you're talking about. And other ones would be cross-trained to a lesser degree. So that's my initial thoughts on that element of it.
I guess I'd like to follow up just a little bit and say this would be probably limited to some extent. It is for truly routine operations that don't involve any emergencies. And if a mishap or some condition arises, it would be recovery from emergency. So the short-term response, any longer-term response would have to involve expertise back at Earth. And so you get into a situation where you can live with the time delay, but you try to extricate yourself from the emergency as quickly as possible.
Yeah, you know, there's the Curiosity was it did not have the capability to make a lot of decisions. It was a low end of semi-autonomous, but Perseverance has benefited from a lot of AI that's gone into it, where Perseverance can make decisions that the Curiosity couldn't, as to when to stop and how to replot the path. The way these rover missions are generally run is that the team back in JPL and Caltech looks at where the rover is, looks at the next the surrounding terrain, and plots a course and sends that information, uploads that information, and so each day is a stepwise safest way to do it. But now there's autonomy being built in. So we've learned a lot in how to negotiate hazardous terrain, among other things. So this is, and as you say, there are intermediate steps of priority, and they're going to have to be handled. But anyway, I appreciate your question. Anyway, got some more, Ken?
Yeah, thanks, Colonel Schulte. So next, James, Mr. Sloan, go ahead.
Okay, my question is about the sealing between the torso and the helmet. How exactly is that accomplished? Is it a matter that there's a very slight pressure between the two? Could you elaborate that?
Yeah, okay, there's multiple candidates for that. Right now, it's a flap. You know, it's a trade-off, because you don't want to strangle somebody with a flap that's around their neck or make them uncomfortable. And at the same time, you want to provide as much mobility and ease of use as possible. So we've looked at everything from a shoulder seal that goes around the upper chest, all the way to just a cannula where you basically breathe into a mask and everything else is surrounded. The one that's being tested right now is a flap that's just right above the shoulders, part of the helmet, and you saw there was little discomfort in there. Our next round of testing is going to be dedicated to how good a seal is it. So how are we going to do that, you might ask? You don't want to poison anybody. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to have air or oxygen that's got something added to it, like a fragrance or a color, so that we can see if any of that is migrated into the helmet from the torso. The other thing to keep in mind is that the helmet pressure will be slightly above that of the torso. There will not be, if there's any transmission of gases, it's going to be from small amounts of oxygen down, not carbon dioxide up. And of course, there'll be appropriate sensors and the ability to change that flow rate. So all of these things are consideration. You know, nobody's going out there and buying our Mars suit today, and we never got in that mode of doing that. We have investors that understand that, and our attitude is, look, if we're not going to Mars for 10 years, the only thing we have to worry about is at the time when a decision is actually made at the highest levels, we will have a suit that's ready. In other words, build it and they will come. That's our attitude. It'd be great to have big bucks partners like SpaceX or whoever else wants to come and say, hey, we love this concept. We're going to make it happen faster and sooner. That'd be wonderful. But that is not necessary. We're dedicated. We've been doing this a long time. We have sufficient funding to get the barriers, no pun intended, addressed in a timely manner. And so that's what's going on.
I'm sorry, I do have one other question. What would be the minimum pressure for the torso?
Well, but we're targeting both at 3.5 psi. That's the absolute minimum because that's the minimum pressure of, used during Apollo, 3.5, 3.7. That's the oxygen pressure. You start off with the oxygen pressure, and then the torso pressure matches it. So you have to match the pressures, and that's how you decide on that. The other part of the formula is pre-breathe and requirements to prevent you know, the bends if you step out from the high pressure to low pressure environment without having to pre-breathe oxygen. So that all depends on what the habitat environment is. If the habitat environment is 8 psi, you can use a 5 psi suit and you won't have to pre-breathe. If the habitat pressure is 8 psi and use a 3.5 psi suit, you have to pre-breathe a short period of time to get the nitrogen removed from your tissues before you can step out. These are all considerations. Those in turn have other requirements because the more the habitat pressure is, the thicker you have to make the walls of the habitat. And the more consumables you have to have, and the higher the suit pressure, the stiffer the material and the harder you have to work against the suit. All of these things are trade-offs that need to be done on an iterative scale. So we're starting, I don't know what drives what. There's a lot of things from the top down, the decision is made. You start with the suit pressure drives everything else. Do you relax the pre-breather requirement, saying, okay, you can pre-breathe for 30 minutes, therefore you can make the pressure lower in the suit and higher in the habitat. The materials we try, I mean, this is a really complex, multi-variable decision to arrive at that answer. But we're starting from the point of maximum mobility, maximum usability, maximum function, and minimum pressure that we can do. So that's where we're targeting now. Thanks for that question.
Okay, thank you, James. So next is Randall. Randall, go ahead. Randall, your mic is enabled, so you can speak out. Randall, can you speak out? Well, or maybe his mic has some issues. So let me see. Yeah, Randall, you are. Let me see. Ask to Randall, can you speak out? If not, I will just read his question. His first question is, the talk on Mars suit was very interesting. Thank you. I enjoy your talk immensely. That's great. With regard to the Q suit, the thoughts with regard to the contamination of the exterior of the suit, bracket contact, and are the filters replaceable? Does filter replacement require special procedures and the protection during decontamination, bracket contact?
The filters are replaceable in a couple of minutes. Basically, you unscrew it in the production version. You unscrew a cap. You put another super HEPA filter in place right in there. By the way, super HEPA filters are designed to last over a year before replacement. So you don't have to use these each time. You can use them as people see fit. They're inexpensive. The notion that you could wear the suit for 14 days, I know it seems onerous, unless you happen to be in a place with a rapid outbreak response. But we're planning on building into the suit a way to get to a sterilizable room, a way to change out of the suit into a safe quarantine room for whatever, showers, food, what have you, waste management, all those things. But we're also planning on having all of those features built into the suit itself, so it can sustain somebody for long periods if you have to be in that environment. But keep in mind, like the coronavirus has a viability of about 3 days. After 3 days, it's no longer a threat. And so that's why I don't know how many people know this, but if you have 3 good masks like N95 or KN95, 4 would be better, lined up on your dresser. The way to ensure you can keep using these masks is just wear one a day, go down the line and start again. And after 3 or 4 days, you won't have to worry that the mask is not functioning properly.
Okay, thanks for Randall's question. So next is Andrea. Andrea, yeah, she will show the video. Do you want to say something, Andrea?
Hi.
Andrea, go ahead.
Hi. Oh, I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you for an excellent presentation. I listened to a lot of these, and this is like way at the top. And I like the spirited conversation that you had with Madhu. I think that the debate's great. It helps my caffeine kick in and wakes me up a little bit. I want to tell you, I really appreciate that because I'm not a vanilla type person. So I like debate, and I think the best comments come out of debate. I really do. That's when I start furiously taking notes when you guys are talking about different points of view. So
you should have seen some of the debates Madhu and I had back at the first ISU about landing a whole lunar base on the moon, which was Madhu's idea. It was a great idea where you assemble the lunar base in orbit around Earth, and you carry the entire assembled base and land it whole on the moon, as opposed to building it on the moon piecewise. And that we had, how many students we had? We had 110 students, and boy, did that split them in half. And that was quite a massive amount of arguing and debating. What you're going to do? You're going to build a base in low Earth. You're going to build a space station in low Earth orbit, and you're going to land it on the moon? Are you crazy? So I mean, that was a lot of fun.
I love it. Well, I'm a classroom teacher, so I like the stimulus. I like I don't like apathy. I'd rather see my students arguing their positions than just sitting there blankly staring at me like I'm on a stage and they're supposed to be entertained. I mean, I want to see engagement. I don't want to just talk to a blank wall.
Andrea, I'm planted here to make this an enjoyable discussion. So I'm happy
not to argue with you about this, but I have 2 questions.
Oh no, here we go, another one.
Here we go, another one. So the dilemma, always the dilemma in a presentation like this, is there's a massive amount of material in a short time, and there's limited time for questions, and even more limited time for debate. That, if you have, this is already at least 1.5 times the normal time I have for a talk like this. I give a lot of these talks on cruise ships to audiences of 200 or more and universities. Generally, I've got 45 to 50 minutes for all of it. And this, you saw this is, gosh, at least an hour of talking and showing slides. And you don't want to seem like you're on a hobby horse running through pedaling, because then you lose the ability to express yourself and get people motivated, like you say. But then you bumped up against questions at the end. It's really difficult. So unless you're given more time, which in a classroom, I'm sure you have the same concerns in a classroom where you're giving a limited time. The other question I had for you is the HyperNet paradigm. I really think that this is a breakthrough way to communicate. And what we did at UC Berkeley with the HyperNet paradigm is we threw away the idea of tests. You would take this class, you would get involved with Mars spacesuit design or cancer research, whatever else it is. And the teams would get involved, and each team would be, those teams were like an industry. They had a schedule, they had bullet points, they had targets, they had responsibility that they had to meet all of these goals. Every person had a goal that they had to meet. That's how their grade was given, as if they were working, not as if they had to regurgitate something that they memorized. And so that's why I think we're able to get so far with this HyperNet paradigm. And I'm hoping that that something like that makes its way into classrooms of the future. If you have any comments, I don't know. But the one other thing that I wanted to know that I've noticed, which is really fantastic, is when you have like 60 people in a class and you give them something like this, you find out very quickly there are leaders, there are followers in the whole thing. It's like a bell curve. And you don't have to assign responsibility, because the responsibility seems to surface by itself.
Yeah.
If somebody takes the lead and they say, okay, I'm going to do this. And what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And crazy as it sounds, it all works. It seems to work on its own.
Yeah, you just throw it out there and then you step back. The teachers, one of the biggest amateur moves that an instructor will make when they first start teaching is they try to lead everything. And the more cured a teacher is, more experienced, the less they speak in the classroom. So they just kind of throw out all the ingredients and stimulate the conversation. Then they have to learn how to stand back.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's when the magic happens. And the problem with the classroom. I'm sorry, I'm going on my own platform, but this is education is the beginning of everything else in my world. So with your world, with Madhu's, everyone's, education is how it starts. So they only give me 50 minutes to present my material. 50 minutes. And that's criminal, because it takes me 40 to 45 minutes to warm up my class. To get those kids, especially the morning classes, it takes literally me pretty much 40 to 45 minutes, and it's very predictable, to warm up the brain and get them to absorb or processing the material that I'm giving them. And then they start coming up with their own ideas and thoughts. And that's when the creative part kicks in. And it gets really good at the last like 5 or 10 minutes of my class, really juicy. And then the dismissal bell rings. It's like, so
well,
that's a problem.
I have a suggestion. First of all, the HyperNet paradigm, we understood right away it had to be geographically dispersed. We didn't have people in the same room. We didn't have people even some of them even in the same country. So we had to have a way of getting this material out and reviewed by everybody. And the way we did it was we had a whiteboard. We had one section of the paradigm was devoted to toss your ideas on a wall after you've had a chance to digest all this stuff, and then everybody else critique it. And then another section was who's done work on this in the past. So we would provide past work and articles. You can read all of this stuff, you know, and see what other people have done. So you don't, one thing you don't want to do is reinvent the wheel. If I told you to invent a Mars spacesuit, we were just starting now, you wouldn't want to go back and do all the things that we've done. So you have to have, one of the tools has to be a tool where you find out what everybody's done. You can call it up anytime. Another one has to be, here's a whiteboard, here are some of my ideas. Another one has to be a way to critique. And another one has to be, let's get together. Let's do it 2 o'clock in the morning. Let's do it this time. When are you good to do all this? So you cannot, the classroom is restrictive. It's, for all the reasons that you said, it's really restrictive. And one of the good things about that's coming out of this whole COVID deal is that maybe we're going to learn that you can have a vastly improved way of communicating, time-wise, in other ways, if you optimize the virtual presence and you put tools into the virtual. Most of the virtual presence that I've seen, they don't have these tools, but they can, because they don't have to be time limited and classroom limited.
Yeah, my
are limitations on learning.
My enemy is the clock. The minute I walk into the classroom, I'm at war with that clock.
Oh.
And I look at that clock and I don't like that clock. And it's constantly ticking, and you know, I'm doing my analog right now. Get it? Analog. The hands are going like this clock, analog. But I'm constantly fighting that. It's a horrible thing. It's the classroom paradigm is not set up for what I do. I give a lot of homework to the kids and send links to the parents and all sorts of stuff, because there's so much stuff that they need to input to absorb and process, that I can't even get to it. And I'm just like trying to create a spark.
Yeah,
when I'm in the classroom.
Andrea, all of us face this problem about meeting length, the meeting times. In our class, of course, it's a graduate class. Most of the work gets done on email. And I bring this up in the classroom. You know, if you want to improve your project, you have to communicate. And everybody will agree that dialogue and discussion is far more important than all the PowerPoint charts that you can bring up. And I think Larry mentioned too, that archives are important. You know, you post them, you put them whatever way you like. It helps all the students to zoom in on what's been done before. You know, no need to reinvent the wheel and things like that. It helps. But you're absolutely right. Meeting times are short. You know, I get 2 hours and 40 minutes, 2 hours and 40 minutes. And even that is not enough to get people fired up on creative ideas. But hey, that is
you need we generated a tool for that. And it might be good to look at that tool, because the whole point of it was to have, as part of your armor to do this, ways to do exactly what I was saying before. Who's done the work? What do you think of it? When can we meet? There's one that my friend Charlie Kamarda, the astronaut, that came up with. He's got, I don't know, 500 students in Finland that he's working on something called the Epic Challenge. It's just to type in the Epic Challenge. This is the whole point of the Epic Challenge, is to address all of these issues that you're talking about. But it seems to filter down to your level or the classroom level, Andrea's classroom level, so slowly and with so much resistance. They are very resistant to any kind of changes in the way things have done.
Yeah,
just like NASA. Yeah. Just like NASA.
Larry, I think it was out of UC Berkeley that I first heard the term flipped classroom. And the idea is that you tell your students the meeting before what you'll be discussing in the coming meeting. And then rather than engage them with slides and so on, pull them up and ask them some critical questions. Ask them to bring up ideas they think are relevant to the topic of discussion. So you really are making them the presenter and not the teacher. And this works some of the time in our class too. If we have a creative development in progress, I email them and tell them, hey, this is what we'll be talking about in the next class. Please refer to these documents and come into class and start a discussion. So we flip the idea of who is in control of the discussion and who is the moderator. The teacher does not just pout stuff out, but he or she moderates. And students get a lot of exciting information. We do this for homework and assignments, right? Students get together and discuss how to solve a problem. We bring it into the classroom too. It works some of the time, Andrea.
Well, communication is very important. And that's one of the things that I teach in my classes is communication, because no matter what industry you go into, you have to be able to communicate. Even if you're going into your boss to ask for a raise and you have to justify your request for the raise, you have to be able to communicate what you want.
I know, it's very important. And now, before I leave you, Larry, it's good to see you. I must ask one more sharp and pointed question.
But before you do, hold on. Before you do, there are 3 questions I see.
Oh, you do?
Open.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, one is from, I don't know if they're still on, Michael Alowitz. Oh, the sound escape and penetrate the suits. I wasn't clear how the subject was mic'd.
Mike is online. Mike is online.
Yeah,
if you want him to explain, he can explain.
I'm here. I'm just going to listen to the answer.
Yeah, he's just going to listen. So I'll say that I'll say sound. Of course, on Earth, sound does penetrate the spacesuit. On Mars, it will penetrate the spacesuit to some degree, but there's 1/100th of an atmosphere there, so sound depends on molecular vibration. So it's not going to be as great. And on the Moon, nothing's going to penetrate it unless it's in contact with the suit itself. So yeah, you can hear those. You can hear him talking because on Earth, in that testing that he did for the Mars suit, he can talk loud enough, so we could all hear him. And the ventilators are not that loud, but certainly it's they'll be mic'd up, of course, so that won't be an issue there. Joseph Schultes has a question about do we believe the U.S. can adequately define the requirements of a lunar EMU and a Mars EMU so that we can unleash U.S. companies and organizations? That's what's going on right now. NASA basically issues the requirements, and that's what's in the RFP. You can find the RFP for the Artemis spacesuit. Just type in on your browser, Artemis spacesuit RFP, a request for proposal, and you can actually read it. I think it's public knowledge. It's a big document, and it'll tell you what the requirements are. Then it's up to whoever wants to bid, and I gave you a whole list of those organizations. And those companies have been around a while, and they certainly are going to come up with individual concepts. If you don't know how the winner is selected, it's I've been part of those review teams. It's quite elaborate. Lots of different categories of competence are selected. Like, do you have any experience? Does your company have experience doing this kind of thing? Who are your people? What's the cost benefit? How do you propose to handle this element and that element and this? So all those things come together, and each one of these gets a score. And it takes weeks, literally, for the evaluators to come together and look at the proposals and come up with a score, and that's how it's usually done. So it's not all the cheapest. It's not always the cheap proposal wins the race, as is evidenced by what happened back in the Apollo era when ILC won the contract. And again, if you haven't seen it, it's fascinating. You need to get that and watch how that contract was originally awarded and what happened after it was awarded. It's just It's kind of history you don't want to have to repeat. Okay, then there's, I see Jaspreet Singh is asking about where can a student find requirements and design analysis studies? And they're all over the place. If you Google my name or UC Berkeley, what I would say, if you really want to start on what we did, you can go you can go two sources I would go to is Twitter, go to ME292, like Mechanical Engineering 292, and you'll see a whole list of presentations by our students putting this whole thing together. This is about 3 years ago, putting elements of it together. And if you go to my YouTube channel, which is under the name N2 Mars, the letter N, the number 2, MARS, I think I've got 60 videos on there, and quite a few of them have to do with Mars spacesuit design. But the one that captures a lot of this is called Mars. It's the Humans to Mars conference presentation, where a lot of us presented. And I'm not. I would suggest if anybody's really interested in this, the Humans to Mars conference is going to be next May in Washington, D.C., or Explore Mars. So I would suggest you do that. Okay, anybody else needs questions answered?
Annette has a question. Annette, go ahead.
Hi,
Annette?
thank you. I was listening to everybody else, and fortunately, a lot of my colleagues already asked the questions and had them answered. I work in bioengineering and biosecurity, so my particular interest is the terrestrial applications of the Q-suit. And I appreciate that you answered all of those questions. The two questions that I do have is, if you said that you have the HEPA filter that is on there, but are the filters interchangeable to address different pathogenic threats as we identify them? So depending on the environment, if it's, sorry.
Yes, if you come up with a better filter, we can just cut it to size, stick it in the cap, screw it in, and you're done. And again, they're redundant. That's why there were 4 of them, 2 up above and 2 down below. Interestingly, on the exit, a lot of thoughts given to all these elements that they're all on the back, so there's no face-to-face exposure. The intake is higher, away from talking to anybody, but the exit is down at the floor, so that if you dump anything, happens to get out, it's going to go. The air is going to go down below to the floor, to a surface rather than into the airstream. So, but all of the filtration systems are designed to just unscrew a cap, put another filter in. As I mentioned before, coronavirus is about 1.125 micron, 0.13 micron. And right now, it's super HEPA filters we're using are 1/10 of a micron. So they'll stop an individual pathogen. And most of the super HEPA filters work, I believe, on ionic chemical rather than, in addition to trapping the particles themselves. What we're dealing with now is, since we don't have, we're looking for a partner to mass produce this in quantity and make the rapid outbreak response a reality. So the rapid outbreak response depends on making arrangements with organizations, states, agencies, schools, whoever, medical facilities. So this takes effort to the next level of where we are, and it's really satisfying to watch how how the Q-suit came together, and is now at the point of pretty close to finishing a production version that can go through certification. But after the certification, then the next step is, okay, we want to make 100,000 of them. We want to have contracts. So how do we do that? And that requires partnerships that we don't have at the moment.
Thank you so much for taking the time to discuss and present all of this with us, and also taking the time to answer all of our questions.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you, Annette. So Dr. Kuznetz, that's all the questions. So we can go back to Madhu if you like.
Okay, sure. Madhu?
You are muted.
Oh, my question had to do with what Annette left off. Any idea how much these Q suits cost, Larry? I mean, vague idea on production cost?
Our target cost is $200 or less, Madhu.
Yeah, well,
And we've done, we've done an analysis of what PPE costs. So I can tell you this. Just going to a dentist's office, and if you look what the hygienist is wearing and the dentist is wearing, or blood labs, or hospitals, each one of those gowns, masks, etc. When you add them all up together, they cost at least $25 a shot, at least. But on top of that, you're talking about between donning and doffing an hour's of time, and then a throwaway. And so if you add that up over the cost of a year, you're looking at thousands of dollars per unit, as opposed to what this is projected to cost, reusable and re-sterilizable. So that's where we think, though, we have a real edge with this. But again, an edge on paper is not an edge in reality. We need to forge the partnerships, which is actually not as easy as it might sound, because those companies making PPE, a lot of them in China, they don't want to, they make that stuff for next to nothing. They send it out, they're making a markup, they're selling thousands of them. It's like, you got to get past that. Would they take it on instead of using slave labor to make something that cost them cents? It's a battle. You got to find the right partners. It would sure be nice to have somebody like a Gates or Elon or whoever you want to name to partner with us, to say we really believe in doing this. It's the way we can stop the next pandemic, which again could be make this look like nothing. It's gonna. So there you go.
And regarding COVID, Larry, am I right to think that you don't need a full body suit? I mean, they do that in the hospitals, we know, but the pathogen mainly enters through your breathing, through your lungs, and infects the patient. So, is it possible to imagine something that just
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'll tell you why. First of all, you wouldn't want to have that discussion with some of the hundreds or thousands of hospital person wearing masks who basically ended up on ventilators, because they took all the right precautions. To say we know how this works is a gross mistake. Say how it can get in. But more to the point, when we started designing this, which is about a year and a half ago, we assumed COVID would be over. We did not do this for COVID. Said, hey, wait a minute. This is probably transferred by a bat or some animal that somebody ate. And don't get me started on that, because history has shown it's from eating meat, transferring from animals.
I think the term is zoonotic. Yeah.
So become a vegan, help yourself. If we were all vegans, this wouldn't happen, but that ain't happening so soon.
Oh, well, I can't thank you enough. I mean, it's a good discussion here. Ken, did you want to say anything?
Yes. Hey, well, actually, I have one last question. Dr. Kuznetz, you mentioned about those wonderful research, university, industry, but are there any of this connected to the space designing or NASA, leading to anything of their efforts, or they are totally on their own?
You mean
those research efforts you mentioned? Yeah, are they anything related to?
NASA has a lot of wonderful programs, but they're all like intern programs and educational resources. But they don't every once in a while, like in the classes that I've taught, I was able to get NASA people involved, just like at the ISU when back when Madhu was a student, we had NASA people giving talks. But it's kind of a slingshot thing. They just show up, they're requesting, they got a trip, they've got an opportunity to spend a couple of days in a classroom. It's not an organized program. University of Houston at Clear Lake, which is close to Johnson Space Center, they have ongoing classes that take advantage of their proximity. So they can get stuff like that in. But what we did at Berkeley was completely different. The whole idea of the HyperNet paradigm, it started at Berkeley back in 1990s, was that we knew this needed to be geographically dispersed. We needed to find partners. We need to have everybody buy into the whole concept of having the students take this over without exams. We started close by with Stanford, our first partnership with Stanford, then University of Rhode Island, and then Texas A&M. And then we kept on reaching out, and individual students would, remember the talent pool that I mentioned? So the talent pool that goes into the HyperNet paradigm can be recruited from anywhere. And a good model that's up there right now and running again is the EPIC Challenge. It's called the NASA EPIC Challenge. You type that in, or you can get a hold of Charlie Camarda, STS-114 astronaut, and he'll fill you in to your ear's content about how to do this.
Okay, I understand. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is
And
wonderful.
Ken, that's a good question. I wanted to ask Larry too. About university involvement, and it's a very important question because many of the things we do are not biased by agency policy decisions and so on, and so it's a welcome addition to the dialogues and discussion that are critical to formulate a really viable, not only economically viable, but also a viable, socially viable projects that somehow NASA seems to avoid completely because of the stratified policies they operate on, and so university involvement is critical.
Madhu, let me cut you off. There's only one bureaucracy that I've ever been exposed to that was worse than NASA. It was UC Berkeley. It is UC Berkeley. Now, it's okay, and USC is just as bad. It's okay for you to talk about it and for me to talk about it. But the truth is, most of the faculty, this is a tenure type faculty, they are people who have to bring in research money to fund their students.
Yeah.
If it's a university, if it's a top tier university, they have a self-interest, which is their own research, and they get a lot of the students to do it. A lot of them don't even have time to teach the classes that they're in, so they get part-timers like you or me that are just adjuncts to fill in, and they pay us almost nothing, 10 grand a year to teach a course that they should be teaching but don't, right? And then we have to put up with all of the restrictions and requirements that entails with that kind of position. And then, do you think they're going to listen to somebody come in and say, hey, we need to have a project-based learning program that ties together all these different fields because we want to solve a problem? The Mars Suit project says, let's start with a problem. Let's cut it into pieces. Let's assign pieces. Let's get all these pieces to use available technology in different departments to come together and not worry about if I'm going to get a 98 in an exam. Now, let me ask you, how easy are you going to get your department to go for that, or even do a demonstration to go for that?
Larry,
talking about.
Yeah, I was talking more about the product, and what we do is publish, and I'm sure UC Berkeley too allows this. We call it the freedom to express. And you don't see that in many of the documents that come out of the administration, that come out of the agency. But universities can do that in a way. I know it's a service more than it's a cheap service, but it's a valuable service.
No argument. But the point of it is, we're in the business of education. If you're in the business of education, the idea is to get passion involved with the students. Now, there's no better way to get passion from a student than to say, "Hey, would you like to work on this great project? Are you interested in?" Let me give you an example. You can apply the HyperNet paradigm to cancer. Let me give you an example of how you can do this. And I've actually run a chart and a proposal to do it. So the way it is, you say, okay, there are about 0.5 to 1% of all terminal diagnosed cancers, stage 3, stage 4, that for some mysterious reason undergo spontaneous remission. These are people who told they wouldn't live more than 6 months that are alive today. We've all heard these stories. So let's even say it's 0.5%. It's a small percent, right? If you take the number of terminal cancer diagnoses worldwide a year, 0.5% is a very, very big number. We all know that, right? Now, you would have thought that somebody would have looked into those spontaneous remissions.
Probably not.
But guess what? They have not.
Yeah,
they have not. And there's a reason why they have not. Because the oncologists who treat the patients, if the patient leaves and has a spontaneous remission, either the oncologist doesn't have time to track them down and ask them, what did you do? Was your lifestyle? How did you blah, blah, blah. And then the other half of the story are the researchers that come up with the protocols. And the researchers that come up with the protocols in the first place, they can't even talk to the patients because of medical privacy regulations. So all of these people fall in a crack. But guess what? They're out there.
Yep.
So can you take a HyperNet paradigm approach? You break cancer into different kinds of cancer. You break it into geography. You have different student teams from all over the world. They're each assigned first find those people. It's like you're a private eye. You're James Bond. You're tracking down thousands of people who had spontaneous remission.
Yeah.
So now you get a data set, right? So the next part of the problem is you come up with a questionnaire. So then you get it sufficiently along where you can turn it over to the medical community looking for commonality, right? Yeah. It's tailor-made for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. So pick anything you want. You want to do any project you want. It falls into this category. But man, not so easy. Not so easy to do. We have a mentality that doesn't embrace this so fast.
Yeah, but our communication systems are so good now, Larry, that we can break through a lot of these so-called protocols and communicate, and that is very useful. And I think your model and many others. I'm thinking of Martine Rothblatt. Remember when she had that problem with that very rare disease? And she went to the company and asked for the formulation, which she then took upon herself to cure her daughter. It's a very rare disease.
Yeah.
Guess what?
Yeah. Those are people, though. What I'm trying to talk about is a system that embraces. It doesn't embrace memorization. It doesn't embrace grades based on tests. It embraces. Universities and schools are preparing people for a career.
Yep.
In a career, you're given a problem to solve. You harness all of the assets around and your friends and everything else. So how in blazes did we get to an education system that discards all of that? It makes zero sense.
Yeah, it's not an easy nut to crack.
It discourages passion, all that stuff. I don't know. Maybe I'm old school or whatever you want to call it.
You're doing a great job, Larry. We just got to continue to do that at all costs. And thank you so much for a wonderful talk. And this discussion could go on forever. but I'm
It
out of
could.
here.
Okay.
Wonderful to see you. And Ken,
too.
I'm out of here. Thank you all for attending and enjoyed it thoroughly. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank
Okay.
you. Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Excellent.
It was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Ken, before you leave, it would be helpful to me if you could give me the time that I actually started talking until the time I got to questions. So I know maybe how to edit this for future talks to get it down to cut 15, 20 minutes out of it or something like that. You don't have to do that now, but if you could let me know, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, I have actually I was tracking that, but I think it's you started around 10. I think it's probably 12, 10, 12 to probably 11:25. That's my initial impression because I've been tracking it. But I'll give you more accurate timing.
Yeah. So that's going to knock about. I'm going to have to knock at least a half an hour. So the other thing you could help me with is maybe give me some idea of where to cut back, because it's I've got to get it down to 50 minutes, but just for all the reasons we just talked about, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, but the video was long though. The one with the video, you play the video on the website.
Yeah.
That was a little bit long. But if it's necessary, that's fine. But there's some part. Yeah, he's walking around. Maybe can kind of make a trailer out of it or something.
Well, tell me how long each videos were, and I
Okay.
can cut the video out and then put them back in for like 2 minutes. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. We'll do that very soon.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ken. Thanks for all your help and support. Thanks, everybody.
No problem.
for,
Anytime. Welcome. Anytime. Any article. Your next talk with us. Highly welcome.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks
Thank
everyone.
you. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Andrea, by the way, before you leave, Andrea, where do you teach?
Well, I teach in California and Nevada, and I have an education consulting company. So I work for a municipality.